Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of El Dorado, the golden city that drove explorers mad. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. Hundreds of men died searching for it. Empires were bankrupted funding expeditions to find it. The jungles of South America consumed entire armies sent to claim it. El Dorado, the golden man, the golden city, the kingdom of unimaginable wealth, said to lie somewhere in the interior of a continent Europeans had barely begun to map. For over a century after the Spanish conquest of the Americas, the myth of El Dorado pulled every variety of adventurer into some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. Most never returned. Those who did came back with stories that only deepened the legend. But here is what the legend gets wrong. El Dorado was not originally a city. It was a man, El Hombre Dorado, the gilded man, a king who covered himself in gold dust and dove into a sacred lake as an offering to the gods. The ritual was real, the lake was real, and the civilization behind the ceremony was far more sophisticated than the Spanish who destroyed it ever recognized. The tragedy of El Dorado is not that the gold never existed. It is that the civilization which created the ritual was annihilated before anyone thought to study it. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. What separates a civilization from a collection of villages? Not technology alone, but organization, the capacity to coordinate thousands of people toward shared goals, to store and transmit knowledge across generations, to build institutions that outlast individuals. These are the hallmarks archaeologists look for when they define a civilization, and for most of the 20th century, the oldest examples they could identify dated to around 3500 BC in Mesopotamia and Egypt. But that benchmark has been steadily eroding. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, discovered in the 1990s and excavated since, consists of massive stone circles with elaborately carved pillars depicting animals, abstract symbols, and human figures. It dates to at least 10,000 BC, roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge, and older than the invention of pottery or agriculture in the conventional sequence. Someone built it. Someone organized the quarrying, transport, and precise placement of limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Someone knew what they were building and why. That level of coordinated effort implies a society more complex than any model of 10,000 BC predicted. Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Every few years, a new site expands the timeline further. Ancient stone structures in Indonesia have been dated to 25,000 years ago. Complex astronomical alignments have been found at sites in Africa predating Egypt by millennia. The human story is older, richer, and more turbulent than the standard narrative allows. When we look at lost civilizations, we are not chasing fantasy. We are attempting to recover chapters of a history far longer than any currently recognized textbook will tell. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding El Dorado, The golden city that drove explorers mad is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The El Dorado myth originated with a genuine ceremony of the Muisca people of the Colombian highlands, practiced at Lake Guatavita. Newly crowned Muisca kings were coated in gold dust and transported by raft to the lake's center, where they dove in and gold offerings were thrown into the water as tribute to the god of the lake. Spanish chroniclers recorded eyewitness accounts of this ritual in the 1530s. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Lake Guatavita has been drained or partially excavated at least 3 times in recorded history in 1545, 1580, and 1911, and each time gold artifacts were found, confirming the core of the legend. The 1545 expedition recovered gold figurines valued at thousands of pesos. The 1911 commercial operation by Contractors Limited of London drained the lake, but hardened mud prevented systematic excavation before the walls collapsed. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The Muisca Confederation occupied the high-altitude savannas of modern Colombia and possessed a sophisticated economy, calendar system, and metallurgical tradition. Their goldwork included the famous Muisca raft, a detailed model depicting the El Dorado ceremony, now held in the Gold Museum of Bogotá and considered one of the finest pre-Columbian gold artifacts in existence. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Spanish conquistador Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada conquered the Muisca in 1537 and seized enormous quantities of emeralds and gold. Yet survivors of his forces were convinced an even wealthier kingdom lay further east. This belief drove a succession of expeditions into the Amazon basin, Orinoco lowlands, and Guiana highlands over the following century. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of Sir Walter Raleigh made 2 expeditions to the Guiana region in 1595 and 1617, searching for a golden city he called Manoa, which he believed lay on a great lake in the interior. His 1617 expedition ended in disaster and led directly to his execution by James I. His published account of the 1595 voyage remained influential for generations of explorers. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Recent archaeological surveys using LiDAR technology have revealed extensive pre-Columbian urban settlements hidden beneath the Amazonian forest. Canopy, including the lost cities of Cujicugu and most recently a network of connected settlements in the Bolivian Amazon described by researchers as exceeding anything previously known in lowland South America. The Amazon was not an empty wilderness, it was densely settled. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain El Dorado, the golden city that drove explorers mad. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that El Dorado as a specific city was always a misinterpretation, and the real wealth of the Colombian and Amazonian interior was not concentrated in a single location, but distributed across an extensive trade network. The legend grew because explorers, expecting a single city, could never find what was actually a decentralized civilization whose wealth consisted of connections rather than a physical treasury. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Amazonian interior did contain cities whose scale and sophistication rivaled Andean urban centers, and Spanish disease wiped out populations so rapidly that these cities were abandoned and overgrown within decades of first contact, leaving only the stories of survivors and the ruins now being discovered by LIDAR surveys. El Dorado was real. It was simply destroyed before it could be documented. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the El Dorado legend was deliberately inflated by indigenous guides to redirect Spanish attention toward dangerous territories and away from actual population centers, an effective defensive strategy that sent wave after wave of conquistadors into disease-ridden, geographically hostile regions where they would die without locating anything worth exploiting. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding El Dorado, the golden city that drove explorers mad, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the muisca raft, cast in Tumbaga alloy around 600 AD and discovered in a ceramic vessel in a cave near Bogotá in 1969, depicts the El Dorado ceremony with extraordinaire. Why detail the chief on a raft surrounded by attendants, confirming the ceremony was not legend but documented muisca religious practice. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented dredging operations at Lake Guatavita between 1898 and 1911, recovered authenticated pre-Columbian gold artifacts from the lake bed, including figurines and ornaments, establishing that centuries of gold offerings had indeed accumulated in the lake, as described by indigenous traditions and Spanish colonial records. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. LIDAR surveys published in 2022 in the journal Nature identified a network of connected pre-Columbian urban settlements in the Llanos de Mojos region of Bolivia, including raised field agriculture, causeways, reservoirs, and residential mounds indicating populations in the tens of thousands, civilization invisible from ground level. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding El Dorado, the golden city that drove explorers mad. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. El Dorado has become a metaphor for unattainable wealth and the madness of obsessive pursuit. But the genuine history behind the legend is being recovered. LIDAR archaeology is transforming our understanding of pre-Columbian Amazonian civilization, revealing that the region was home to millions of people living in sophisticated urban environments before European diseases arrived and killed perhaps 90% of the indigenous population within a century of contact. The forest that Europeans called pristine and empty was actually a post-apocalyptic landscape, the silence not of wilderness, but of catastrophe. The golden civilization was real. We are only now beginning to recover its outlines. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis. And the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of El Dorado, the golden city that drove explorers mad, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of El Dorado ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.